Feel like I'm working with Bob Johnson?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Saturday evening of my pre-board Doug Masters, the Kayfabe Corner. Any questions for my guests or myself, my co-host tonight, feel free to call at 954-246-0398. My guest tonight's been all over the world. His brothers and sisters, all his relatives, have been there and done that. Mr. Bruce Hart. How you doing, sir? Welcome to our show.
I'm not doing bad, guys. Thanks for having me on, and I'm looking forward to kind of, shooting the shit with you guys, so to speak. on anything, or if there's anything you guys want to talk about or inquire about from back in the day or present, whatever. I'm looking forward to kind of sharing perspectives and whatever else. Should be fun.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hey, my co-host, Assistant Sean Bryant, bring him on board. Hey, Sean, how you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me again there, Doug. Bob, well, thanks again for running the show. This will be a good little insight into some history here. We're going to go back to some British. We're going to go into a little bit of Stampede. We'll talk about everything Hart family related. Probably even talk a little bit about Natty and some of the things that she's been doing lately, and just talk a little bit about what it's like being, what it was like to be growing up, being a member of the Hart family, and so much more. Bruce, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Bruce.
So, first thing is, obviously, we know, or at least I'm pretty sure, you were trained by your dad. Is there anybody else that trained you, Bruce?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough, I was fortunate enough to be trained by a few guys. There was a few old Mexicans, a guy named Frank Butcher, who was pretty helpful, and then there were some pretty good English guys that helped me a bit, Jeff Ports, and I think when I was early on, I had some of the Japanese guys like Hito and Sakurato were pretty good, kind of, gave me a lot of perspective on Japanese wrestling, and then I really learned a lot in England when I went over there, and early on in my career, I was fortunate enough to go over to England, and I was there for close to a year. And that's where I met Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy, and I was fortunate enough to get them to come back to Calgary, and I actually made the acquaintance of quite a few English guys over there. Some of whom you guys might have heard of, guys like Chris Adams and a guy named Marty Jones, another guy named Steve Wright, Les Thornton. Those guys were all pretty damn, good workers. It was a very, useful trip for me to go to England, and I, was fortunate enough to, kind of bring some of those young English guys back to Calgary, where they really played a huge role in kind of, training Brett, and they had a lot of influence on Owen, and they had a lot to do with kind of revolutionizing the style in Calgary. By the time I had brought Dynamite and Davey over, I was, given the opportunity to be the booker in Calgary, and I went out of my way. I had seen some of the English guys, and I had been able to kind of cross section with some of the Japanese guys. So all of a sudden I went out of my way to kind of incorporate the Japanese, the British style, and our own kind of. We had kind of a pretty strong, solid style already in Calgary, but the British and the Japanese, and to some degree the Mexican, added a lot of different dimensions to it, and that was one of the reasons why so many guys that came out of Calgary I thought were really successful, and had a lot of success wherever they went, whether it was WWE or Japan or the States or wherever, so I consider myself fortunate that I was able to, early on in my career, go to some of those places and learn firsthand about the different styles, and I went out of my way to include all those elements in the Stampede style, and you see a lot of it, or you would have seen a lot of it in the guys who came out of Stampede, whether it was Owen or Brett, or Dynamite, Davey, the Japanese guys, and Pillman and Benoit and guys like that. So they all had a pretty unique style, but it's an old saying, often imitated but never really duplicated, and I've never seen anyone really kind of, in my estimation, exceed that, that brand of wrestling. And so,
what would you say? What would you consider, or how would you say the Stampede dungeon style? What would you say that was? It was different and unique in its own way. What do you think set it different apart from other styles of wrestling?
I would say, as I already mentioned, there was a lot of diversity in those. The British style was kind of a unique, compelling style. They didn't do much punching and kicking and that kind of stuff, but they had quite a bit of pretty good technical wrestling, even, and we had, for whatever reason, my dad and Stampede Wrestling had been kind of the launching pad for a lot of the British guys prior to that, Billy Robinson, Jeff Ports, Les Thornton, guys like that, and Dynamite and Davey and Marty Jones, and some of those guys were kind of, even an extension of that. Steve Wright, another guy that we had in, and they're all really excellent ring technicians, if that is a word for it. They did very little punching and kicking and that kind of thing, but they were really good at chain wrestling, and they had a pretty good sense of ring psychology, and then that was supplemented by the Japanese guys who were and most of the Japanese guys we had in were into this pseudo shoot fighting, and we had guys like Hito and Sakurada and Georgie Kano and Saito and Kichi Yamada, who became Jushin Liger, and they were enthralled with the British style. So I remember all the Japanese guys wanted to work with Dynamite, especially, and there was a really good kind of hybrid there, and then the Stampede style was pretty hard-hitting and dynamic, my dad's style, and we had a few veterans that were, had been in Calgary, or a guy like Leo Burke and Archie the Stomper and a few of those guys, and they were advocating a pretty hard-hitting, but pretty serious style too, and so it all became pretty, kind of like a hybrid, and I was lucky enough when I started booking to have a lot of those guys at an early stage of their career where they were willing to listen and oblige me as far as what I was wanting them to do, and it proved to be a really productive stretch. I think the best indication of how productive it was just the remarkable number of guys that came out of there that went on to become, not just stars in WWE, but they're cutting edge types of guys that everyone was, endeavoring to, emulate, guys like Brett and Dynamite and Davey and, Pillman, Benoit, guys like that, Liger, almost every one of those guys were guys that everyone, the new guys were all like, geez, I want to be like Dynamite Kid, or, well, I want to be like the Hitman, I want to, aspire to be, like Pillman and that type of thing. So, I guess
did you help train a lot of those guys?
Yeah, what's that again?
Did you were you a helping hand in training some of the guys like Pillman and Benoit and those guys?
I was the main trainer. I think, as you guys probably know, WWE, when I was in that mode of, taking over territories and putting that kind of stuff, back in about '84, they came and basically pillaged our territory, took most of the top guys, including Dynamite and Davey and Brett and Schultz and Bad News and Neidhart and a few others, and my dad started up about a year later after WWE didn't live up to the deal that they were, as they did with everyone else. But so I had to start virtually from scratch. I had to start a whole new group of young guys, and it was a tough period because WWE was, going strong. They'd really hit the ground running with Hulkamania and all of that, so they were really dominating. And
what was your thought then when they did that? What was your thought then, booking process? What did you think about them when you did that? What come to your mind?
I was pissed, rightfully, because they didn't really deliver on the deal that they cut with my dad. But in any case, I had to start from scratch with, essentially just a bunch of green guys, rookies, and we had a few veterans. Yeah. But most of the green guys, to their credit, they were willing to, listen and, do what I instructed them to do. And I think everyone else around that time was striving to copy WWE and that style, and I wasn't that big of a fan of it from an athletic perspective. So I was well aware of what we had, enjoyed success at, prior to that. So most of those young guys I took at that time were, intent on becoming an alternative or something different than WWE, and that was exactly what happened. I had Owen and Pillman and Benoit and Liger, and they're all at that stage raw rookies. None of them had worked anywhere before, and I brought in a few other British guys and a few Japanese guys like Hiroshi Hase I guess the proof is in the pudding, because almost all those guys I mentioned, and at that time, they were the antithesis of what WWE was. You had Hulk Hogan and John Studd and Andre the Giant, and those. It was Ultimate Warrior. That was the style, and WWE, the big, anabolically enhanced, not particularly
bigger guys.
And they weren't really, in my estimation, great ring technicians, but that whole thing was kind of the mode at that time, and at that very time, a lot of the skeptics in the business were kind of sneering at what they referred to as the midgets in Calgary, which was Owen and Pillman and Benoit and Liger and Hase and Nakura and Georgie Takano and a few of those guys, and as it turned out, almost every one of those smaller guys went on to become a big star, and they were really dynamic, and they had a really hard hitting but exceptional style, and so yeah, it was an interesting period there, and I'm certainly proud of the success that those guys kind of rendered, and they were a big influence on the next generation of guys that I trained after that. That was like my nephew Harry, David Hart Smith, or whatever they call him, but Harry and Tyson Kidd and Natalia and some of them, and I've always found it was kind of regrettable. I don't know what I always thought WWE could have and should have been aiding and abetting, places like Stampede, I never got a penny for any of the guys I sent there, and yet all those guys were, huge. They contributed enormously to the success of WWE, and I've had so many of the ideas and concepts that I, initiated, the triple threat matches, which I called Bermuda Triangle matches initially, and there was a lot of stuff that came out of Stampede. I know my brother Brett was, funneling ideas like the ladder matches, which is another Stampede concept, and triple threat matches, and, heel referees, and a lot of those things, they all made WWE a lot of money, and very rarely have I ever heard them even acknowledging that they got them from Stampede, or that they were copying concepts out of Calgary. Even the style, which was I remember when back in the 80s when I had those smaller guys like the Pillmans and the Owens and the Benoits, and prior to that the Dynamites, and I remember the old bookers from WWE when they came in, like Gorilla Monsoon or Joe Scarpa, Chief J, and Jack Lanza and Billy Red Lions, and they were always sneering, at the style which they refer to as midgets up in Stampede, and always making out like they're going to have to take a Dynamite Kid, or they're going to have to take an Owen or a Brett or a Benoit or whatever, and break all the habits that they had learned in Stampede and teach them how to work and all this,
Yeah, they'd take them back down here and take them back to Vince and still use the same stuff, what they had learned up there, and discovered it and brought it down here and used it to their advantage, but yet never acknowledged your father or you or any of them that you guys put into these guys.
It's frustrating, I don't. I guess it should be somewhat flattered that they're, imitating or emulating the things that we were doing up in Stampede way back when, but very rarely have I ever heard much acknowledgement or much thanks, or anything like that. I sure as hell haven't received a penny for any of it, and I don't care. If nothing else, I'm, intrinsically, gratified, I guess, that so many of those guys that started, from scratch up in Stampede, enjoyed success. I'm glad for that, and I always am gratified if some of them are, nice enough to acknowledge or, point out that they're grateful for, what they learned down there, so.
Yeah, bro. I got
real quick. Hey, Bob.
I got a dog.
Bob, are you still there? Hold on. Bob, are you out there? Great. Where did Bob go? I got somebody trying to call in, Doug.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I can't get him to. I can't get nobody to pick it up.
Okay, I'm going to talk to Bruce about this for a minute. Hey, how about the dungeon? Everybody wants to know about the dungeon. What was your experience like listening to it? All your life being a part of it? Everybody wants to know about the dungeon.
Yeah, the dungeon was, it was pretty damn bare bones and basic, which I'm not sure if you ever saw that movie, Rocky 3, I guess, where Sylvester Stallone went back to the, kind of the supposed, something like the dungeon and bare bones, and that's pretty much what the dungeon was. There was no ropes even, and it was just 4 walls and an old mat. And my dad used to, back in the 50s, and it was kind of like a pit where he mostly instilled respect, or mostly shooting with these young guys, and that's where it got the name the dungeon, because it was kind of not for the faint of heart. It was my dad and a few of these other. My dad had a few old cronies that were pretty, deadly shooters. A guy named Luther Lindsay, another guy named George Gordienko, and there was a few others, Gordon Nelson, and anybody who wanted to get into wrestling back then, it was kind of obligatory to pay their dues, and in the form of being, stretched. And my dad always told me it was kind of a means of, making these guys respect the business and respect themselves and that kind of thing. So, but yeah, I know when I went to England later on, there was another place similar to the Dungeon over in Wigan, and I went there with Dynamite Kid a few times. That's where Billy Robinson and some of those guys had come out of, and it was along the same lines as the Dungeon, and they used to call it the Snake Pit over there, and
Snake Pit over there in Dungeon over there. Snake Pit over there in Dungeon where you're at. Wow.
Yeah, I think back back in those days there was, a number of promotions in the States that seemed to have that same mindset. I know Minneapolis had an old guy named Joe Pazendak and another old shooter named Butch Levy, and they used to. And Vern Gagne was kind of an advocate. He was an old amateur, and then I think Oklahoma had Leroy McGurk and those guys, Danny Hodge, and and Dory Funk Sr. was, an old amateur, and I think Judo Gene LaBelle down in L.A. had a pretty good record as a shooter, and Eddie Graham had a few old shooters down in Florida when he was breaking in guys. He had old Hiro Matsuda and Carl Gotch, and so that was part of the mode of the business back in those days, was to kind of make these guys pay their dues in the form of blood, sweat, and tears, I guess, and they were a lot more, as you guys know, protective of the ostensible propriety of the business, as far as, at no point did they ever acknowledge that it was a work or anything less than a shoot type thing, and that was part of the mode, if you went through the places like the Dungeon, you were disinclined to be exposing it, and it was considered a cardinal transgression to do that. So I think that in a lot of ways was one of the reasons why there was such an outcry and disgust with WWE, Vince and company, openly disclosing that it was so-called sports entertainment or whatever the hell they want to call it, so yeah, those are some of the, some of the things that, were characterized the Dungeon and the style, and
Did you guys ever get worked over down there?
Oh yeah, many a time. I remember when we were kids, and my dad, we were pretty young then, but my dad would, at times he'd be down there with some old, guy like Gordienko or Lindsay or, some of those old shooters, and Stu would be, come over here, like that, and drag me or my brother Smith or Keith or whatever, and next thing you know, they have you in some damned, submission halls, and can you feel it? It'd be like, in a pretzel, and so yeah, I was through it many a time. I don't think I was quite the recipient of as harsh a treatment as some of the, I think my dad always had a special, kind of degree of whatever against these big muscleheads. It seemed to be some exceptionally vicarious satisfaction in stretching some big musclehead, especially if they had a big mouth. They were, egocentric, and they would,
I heard some guys would run out of there.
Oh, I remember all kinds of. I remember one time. I think 2 Army boys showed up one time, and they're pretty good shape, pretty good size, and they came down there, and they're saying, "Hey, Stu." I can't remember who our top heel was, maybe Abdullah or something like that, and they were saying to Stu, we can kick the shit out of Abdullah or Archie the Stomper or whoever, and my dad said something about maybe before you try the big boys like that, you might, try an old fart like me, and they said, no offense, Stu, but you'd be no challenge or some shit like that. So that kind of pissed my dad off. So next thing, my dad had one guy on the mat and was torturing the hell out of him. Had double grapevine and arms behind the head and all the other, and the other Army boy picked up a weight and said, Stu, if you don't let him go, I'm going to hit you. And Stu said, if you don't put the fucking weight down, I'm going to break his fucking neck.
Is it another Calgary collar?
Yeah, and then when my dad told me when he let the guy go, the 2 of them went running out into the night, didn't even grab their shoes or anything.
Call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that's probably Bob Johnson.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi, Bruce.
Hello. Oh, hi, how are you?
I'm great. I've been a wrestling fan all my life. I was wondering, what was it like growing up with Stu Hart in the dungeon and all that?
What's that again?
She wanted to know what it was like growing up in the dungeon, which we just talked about, but
it was,
maybe give her a little bit.
I must have missed it. I must not understand what y'all were talking about. I bet you was kind of wild, though.
It was fascinating as a kid because at that point, we weren't really the least bit smart to the business, and it was a steady procession of all these. Back then, there was a lot of the guys who were wrestling, and they would come down there and train, or they would come up to the house to get their paychecks every Saturday, and there was, a bizarre mix of, kind of weird characters, Mad Dogs, and like I remember Morris Mad Dog Vachon, and the Great Antonio was down there, and there was Gorgeous George types, and I remember we had this black guy with blonde hair named Sweet Daddy Siki, and we had occasionally midgets, and I remember a bald-headed lady wrestler, and my dad had the wrestling bear down there. It was hibernating there for a couple of months when I was a kid, and so I remember it was. And oddly enough, my dad's house was sort of out in the country back in those days, and much to my mother's chagrin, we had like goats and chickens and cows and a few other animals there, and I always sort of figured we were like kind of a twisted version of Beverly Hillbillies and the Addams Family cross, you know.
I heard.
With all these weird, and it was a steady diet of that, like nonstop of these unusual, you know. Back then was the mode was these Nazis. I think Fritz von Erich was breaking in way back when, and all these Russians and all the Japanese guys we had up back then were all these, you know, supposedly World War II type Kenji Shibuya, Mitsuo Arakawa, and
I think all these characters is what drew me to the business. Really, I mean, I watch it on TV.
But if they trained with Stu Hart, they got to learn from someone who ultimately was a wrestling purist, so they had to make the wrestling count too.
Oh yeah, it was a fascinating kind of upbringing, and I still, you know, have said it many a time. I think WWE or maybe this new AEW, I think they need to revisit some of the, you know, the precepts of that era as far as
old school territories.
You know, establishing some perceptible quasi-legitimacy and cutting back on the show aspects of the so-called entertainment and the bullshit, you know, and get back to more wrestling. And I don't see that happening these days. You know, if anything, I see, you know, because there's so few guys who are capable of, you know, actually wrestling or making it look real, they invariably seem to have to keep going farther and farther in the direction of, you know, stuff that's not believable or that's not really wrestling or is, you know, going out with, you know, chairs and tables and pulling gimmicks from under the ring and don't always, you know, and I think that's something that, you know, I think they need to go back to the basics, but a big part of their problem is they don't have any, most of the new guys have been, you know, taught anything but the basics, and
I said that plenty of times. I know where you're going with it, man, because all I see is a high spots display more than anything else, and like you said, the basics, to give them the real workout with a smaller ring that's not 20 by 20, you know, and just learn the real ground and pound.
Used to say a high spot ceases to be a high spot if all you're doing high spots. You may as well go to the damn circus or watch some stuntmen or some damn thing. But yeah, I think that's, you know, if I was giving AEW, Tony Khan, or any of those guys, you know, if they're serious about purporting themselves to be a compelling alternative to the WWE, they need to almost kind of go back to, you know, some kind of a quasi-shoot fighting. And, you know, I give Dana White credit, and I'm not even necessarily sure that UFC's a shoot, but at the very least they, you know, keep it within the parameters of a shoot, and they're not deviating too much, you know. And I think wrestling fans, they must have had their fill of high spots and holy shit and all that, you fucked up and all that bullshit. You know, I think they need to, you know, kind of go back to square one. And but easier said than done. I think in order for that to happen, they need to almost kind of retrain. And one of the big problems these days with any of these bigger promotions is back in the Hulkamania days, wherever Vince and them were able to just kind of hire all the best talent from Stampede or Portland or Amarillo or Florida or wherever, and that's no longer the case. And
it was.
I'm not a huge advocate.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not a huge advocate of this. Whatever they, they purport their training thing down in WWE's, got that NXT and all that crap. But one of the beauties of the business back in the day was the diversity. Like most every territory had a sort of a style, and that was one of the beauties of the business. Is these wrestlers would travel from territory to territory, and they, a guy that came up from Amarillo or came up from Tennessee, or a guy from Calgary that went down there or whatever, they would bring those different styles, and it enriched and kind of made the business what it was. Even when we were bringing the Japanese and the British, those styles enhanced and enriched our style, and that's not the case anymore today. You got all these guys coming out of the same cookie cutter factory, and not to be a cynic, but half the trainers down there are not particularly savvy or gifted or anything either. And all they're really doing is obliging the headbangers in the WWE office, most of whom don't know a wrist lock from a wristwatch. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, let me go one step further, and I'll definitely let the caller and Sean take it back over here. I think WWE had one chance to really get them back to basics. They had one shot at doing it, and nobody was really willing to take it seriously, and that's when they still had the developmental territory of Ohio Valley Wrestling, and you didn't have Jim Cornette handling it there anymore. You didn't have Paul.
I was always, it always to me was kind of, something that made these guys more valuable to our promotion if they came out of a different environment, like they came from Japan, or they came from Wigan Gym in England, or they came from, Dory Funk's territory or whatever. And I was always like, wow, that's cool. I was always wanting to, show me what they had learned, or, and everybody had a different style, and, it's just like the United States. That was one of the things that made the United States the greatest country on the face of the earth, was these people coming from all these different backgrounds, the Italians and the British and the Hispanics and the African Americans, and the wrestling should be like that, rather than suppressing new ideas and concepts and stuff. You should be embracing them and endeavoring to incorporate them into this homogeneous mix, and that's one of the things the wrestling business is lost and needs to reestablish, and I don't see that necessarily happening, though.
I know wrestling has to evolve. I know it has to evolve, and I know what you're talking about. Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
That's all right. Tell me about WrestleMania 26 and getting somewhat of a revenge for Brett in a way.
Yeah, that was the one where I refereed the
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, that was kind of more of a exercise in futility or frustration for me. And I remember they called me in, before the day of the show. They assembled us maybe about 6-8 hours before the show, and Vince and Hunter and Michael Hayes and they ran this finish by me where initially Brett, I think Vince was supposed to be making out like he was trying to bribe me, and then Brett's supposed to say, "Did you get your money from Vince?" And I'm supposed to say, "Yeah," and then Brett said, "Good, because I'll double it." Like so I'm supposed to feel like some kind of a unprincipled whore who's just selling out, and all like that. But they ran this finish, by us that essentially they had all the Hart kiddies, Harry and TJ and Natty and my brother Keith and whoever else out on the floor, and essentially we were just supposed to they're supposed to beat the crap out of Vince, and I'm supposed to be doing about what Elias has been doing lately when he's refereeing Kevin Owens matches or some crap, and then and they ran that by me, and I think Michael Hayes was running it all by me, and Hunter's beaming like I think it was mostly his ideas, and they said, "What do you think?" And I said, "It's your business, and whatever, but I think it sucks. It's a bunch of shit." And they were all like wide-eyed. I said, just off the top of my head, I said, if you consider what's transpired in the last few years, I said, this is Brett's first match back since he's had the stroke, and then you guys had this charade, about a month or so before, where Brett was supposedly injured backstage, and somebody slammed his foot in the limousine door or some bullshit. And then I said, and beyond that, you had the big kiss and makeup with Sean and Brett, where you had them shake hands and all this other. So I said, just off the top of my head, if you did a finish where, given that this is Brett's first match back since his near fatal stroke, and he was further injured by the limousine, getting his leg slammed in the door and all the other. I said, if Brett just went out and sold his ass off, and I said, you got maybe Hunter, he could be involved if you want. But I said, all Brett needs to do is sell his ass off, and then finally he makes the big penultimate balls to the wall comeback, and people should be rocking and rolling at this point, and then I said, you could maybe have Stephanie come running up to the ringside sobbing that her daddy Vince is, at which point Hunter, I said I would maybe go to Stephanie, and Hunter comes in and lowers the boom on Brett and nails him, with sledgehammer or whatever the hell, and the two of them, Vince and Hunter, are, putting the boots to Brett, and I said, at which point, who hits the ring but the Heartbreak Kid? You know, I said, you guys, for whatever reason, I might have had some bullshit at Royal Rumble where Hunter had something to do with Sean being eliminated or some crap. But I said, just, you know, all of a sudden, Heartbreak Kid comes in and gives the sweet chin music to Hunter and maybe to Vince and Brett and Sean. You know, hell freezes over tag team. Call Vince and Hunter out, and it would set up a hell of a hot return for maybe SummerSlam or something like that. Brett and Sean against Vince and Hunter, and anyway, they seem pretty, they're like, whoa, considering the possibilities, and much to my chagrin, the guy who gave it the thumbs down was Brett. He said because of his Lloyds of London something or other, he was only allowed to have one match or some crap like that, and I don't know if that was ever the case, but yeah, in my estimation, that would have been a lot hotter, and for me, it was for want of a better term, a limp dick orgasm at that whole match. It wasn't really, the least bit entertaining or compelling or anything. I just went along with whatever the hell, but it certainly didn't maximize the inherent potential.
Hey, sir, brother. Yeah. Hey, tell us a little bit working with Pillman and Minimal. I know they're both gone already, so.
I sort of reflect, it's kind of sad. As I was telling you before, I took all those guys when they were young guys and broke them in, and it was exceedingly sad how many of those guys, all pretty dynamic and talented and pretty good guys. They not just Pillman and Benoit, but Dynamite and Davey and quite a few others. And what's kind of sad or ironic about it is none of those guys were really what you'd call druggies or that kind of thing, but they seem to become victims of the they call it the subculture, or just this kind of inexorable state in the WWE where there's the opportunity for drug abuse, or it's almost kind of, we even say the opportunity for it's almost become, obligatory to indulge in, the anabolics for sure. You had to get into that, and because you're maybe, getting injured because of your, having abused steroids and you're too muscle bound and you're tearing muscles and you're starting to, take painkillers, and then there's this kind of rock star mindset that they seem to delude themselves that they need to engage in, so they're, snorting coke and getting high and all. It's kind of like an inexorable cocktail that overtakes them, and often with tragic outcome. But
yeah, I agree hard.
And it's,
I agree hard.
I don't put any stock whatsoever in the pseudo so-called drug testing and all like I would venture to say there's as many guys abusing whatever in there now as ever, and as many guys anabolically enhanced and all the other, and you'd have to be a mark to think otherwise. I think the only guys who maybe get busted are guys that they want to get rid of at any given time. Oh, you have to take a piss test or something. Unless I'm a mark, I'd say there's as many, anabolically enhanced guys in there now as there was back in the days of Hulkamania or whatever, and which is fine, if that's what they want to do, but they shouldn't be making out like they're, rigidly adhering to all these testing. I guess it's about the same as the NFL, there's, I'm sure all kinds of, anabolic enhancement down there, and every now and then somebody drops dead and they all make out like there's strict testing, but guys seem to be more humongous than they ever were, and so I don't know,
Hey, brother, what do you think about today? It's kayfabe, Everybody knows more kayfabe in the business. And your opinion
what do I think about kayfabing?
Kayfabe. What did you learn when you first started about kayfabe? How do you do that? Tell me about it.
I think, for all intents and purposes, I think it's a bunch of crap, sanctimonious. I don't think the fans ever really were seeking to be told it was a work and all the other. It's about like somebody, going to church, and before you go in, somebody saying it's all a work, and it's we have no idea whether there's heaven or hell or whatever, but put your money in the thing and buy into the, I don't think the people ever were really seeking to know, and they should have just left it as is. I would still say it sounds stupid saying it now, but I don't think the fans even want to know now. If you do it well enough and you shoot angles that are compelling enough and have wrestlers playing their roles convincingly enough, and the people, heaven forbid, buy into it, or, wow, I think those guys are shooting, or I think so-and-so really hates so-and-so. That's cool. It's like going to a damn movie and so well done. You kind of suspend your disbelief or invest your emotions, and that's what it's all about. So, I think if anyone, if at some point somebody divulged that UFC was all the work, and people wouldn't want to know, and they'd be going, no, I choose to believe that Daniel Cormier, hates this guy, or that GSP wants to, destroy, Chael Sonnen or whatever the hell, So, I don't know. I don't think WWE took the right turn in the road, and smartening anyone up or whatever. They don't deserve the least bit of credit, or nobody should be hailing anybody as a genius for calling it sports entertainment, whatever the hell that is, you know. Can you guys imagine somebody, exposing NFL and saying, and we're going to call it gridiron entertainment now or some bullshit like that, you know. It's like,
exactly.
Where you just leave it. Yeah.
Back in the day, brother, when you had an hot angle going or in a territory, whoever wind up, let's say you and I was working the angle together. Whoever winds up, in the first restaurant, the other one should leave, correct? That's what I'm really going back to, baby. Yeah.
So, and what's kind of amusing is my dad told me that there was cynics and skeptics 100 years ago, you know, back in the Strangle Louis Frankoch days that were, you know, casting aspersions about it being a work, and my dad told me, you know, you didn't need to, you just go out and do it, you know, and there was probably as many cynics back then, but they weren't ever buying a ticket or anything anyway, so it didn't matter, but, so, yeah, I think the biggest mistake or the biggest shortcoming is, most of the wrestlers are, I think they've been poorly trained, or they don't realize that they don't have the capability or the capacity or the mental, you know, wherewithal to make it look like a shoot, which is what the great workers used to do back in the day, the Luthezes and the Dory Funks and the Ray Stevens or whatever, you know, they had, you know, the imagination and capability of making it look like
killing kayfabe ruined the business.
Yeah, and it sounds stupid, but I think if you, I don't think you're ever gonna, you know, it's, I think, too far gone to ever, you know, be adamantly insisting it's a shoot or anything like that, but nonetheless, if using a poker analogy, if you keep your cards close to your vest and you're not, you know, divulging finishes 6 months before, and you're, you know, keeping it all
6 months before the show even goes.
Yeah, if you're, you know, kind of keeping things pretty well concealed, or you're not, you know, showing your cards before you play them. I think fans, at the very least, would like to indulge in being able to, you know, kind of guess what might happen rather than being told already beforehand, you know, and you know, I'm not sure if I'm, you know, living in a delusional pre-Hulkamania world or something, right? I think that, you know, you can go back to that, but, you know, I've seen enough of the great workers who, you know, do everything pretty logically, and the booking's pretty seamless, and you know, kind of create compelling scenarios, and, you know, guys play their roles convincingly enough that you, you know, find yourself hating their guts or feeling sympathetic for them or whatever, and ultimately that's what it's all about, you know, is being able to go on this intrinsically satisfying emotional roller coaster ride where subliminally you are kind of indulging in the notion that you're cheering and you're booing and you're, you know, whatever's got some bearing on the outcome, which is why you do it, you know, and so, you know, I think that, you know, ultimately the fans would like to vicariously indulge in that notion. Otherwise, it begs the question: what's the point? What's the point of cheering or booing or wearing a Kofi Kingston T-shirt or doing the yes, yes, yes or whatever if it doesn't have any bearing on anything? So,
yeah.
But yeah, maybe I'm delusional or living in in the past, or I don't know what the hell, but I don't really think I am. I've been around it that long and endeavored to look at it from every different conceivable angle, and I think the fans, as I said before, it's not much different than going to church. You gotta, kind of invest your faith and your convictions and your emotions and all the other, and if you don't, what's the point?
Right. Hey, Bruce, I got a serious question. I've always wondered, what with everything that happened with Owen, was the family ever given any kind of serious apologies or anything like that for whatever happened and all that?
I don't honestly know. It's hard to kind of dissect, and it's hard to. There's so many intertwining issues. All things considered, I believe it was an accident. Nonetheless, I don't think that Owen or any other wrestler should have been ever put in a position where they're risking their lives as that, as such, for there's no reason for it. It's, the wrestlers aren't the great Belinda, or they're not circus performers, or they're just wrestlers. They didn't need to be. So, having said that, I don't think there was any valid excuse for having him up there in the first place, and I think WWE was sincere in feeling bad about it. I never ever felt that there was any malicious. I don't think that it was intentional, or I've heard, conjecture to that, degree that it was supposedly, there was some malicious intent, and I don't think any of that was the case, but
Martha Hart seems to think otherwise.
Yeah, I think it was just a very unfortunate, ill-conceived accident, and if nothing else, I would hope that it would have been a lesson learned to WWE to not have any other wrestlers putting themselves in situations like that where something similar could happen again. And I don't necessarily feel that way. I think that they're pushing the envelope all the time with guys coming off the top of cages, and a lot of irresponsible high risk, dangerous stuff that need not be done, and I'm not sure if they've learned the lesson, and so I don't think anything necessarily good came out of it. It was devastating for the family. I think it was pretty hard on WWE too. I think, I might be wrong, but I honestly think that the McMahons were pretty fond of Owen, and I've never felt that they. And Owen was pretty well loved by, the wrestling fraternity.
If people really saw what was going on there, I think the whole world should love Owen Hart, and I think because he wound up doing the Blue Blazer and all that because of the fact that he was not willing to do anything else that was going to make him look like he was compromising himself and his family.
Oh yeah, I've always said I
kind of stood by that.
I don't think WWE. I don't think they used him anywhere near to maximize his potential. I don't know what to attribute that to, whether it was bad booking or what the hell. But I never. That was one of the bigger disappointments for me. Was in retrospect on he was there for a decade or so, and only near the end was he ever even used anywhere near close to his true potential. He was like one of those.
Truthfully, he was much better than his brother,
Daniel Bryan. Yeah, and I don't know what to attribute their misuse of him to, whether it was bad booking or what, but he was a far better worker. He was a phenomenal worker when he got there, and instead they had him in a kind of one lame horseshit persona after another, from being teamed up with Coco and high energy and playing an obnoxious little whiny heel and all kind of. It was like
remember that Bruce? Remember that match when it was on against Brett, when they did that brother against brother angle?
Oh,
they had going.
Yeah,
how did
very little of it was
your family.
Yeah, I know when we were down in Chicago and we were parked in the audience as much I don't know, they always had us, being perceived to be a bunch of kind of, intellectually challenged morons who were kind of at odds with each other, and my poor mother being, feigning tears, and my dad looking like he was some kind of, inert clod who didn't quite get it. It was all bullshit, and I don't know whether that was deliberately demeaning or it was just bad booking or whatever. But I never enjoyed or endorsed any of that crap, and it was kind of a decade of, even when we did the thing a few years back when we were, when I was refereeing Brett's so-called match with Vince and the Hart Kitties were on the floor. For me, it was, it was a bunch of, ill-conceived garbage, But
I don't know if this is a right thing to say or not. I don't know, and I know I'm taking a chance probably saying this. Has anyone really Martha, or is what people are saying true, that Martha is doing whatever she can to keep herself and her kids away from as far away from the business as possible? I don't know if that's something you'd want to talk about. Yeah, it's kind of
sad. I have nothing but empathy for Martha. Lost her husband, her kids lost their father, etc. So I can 100% appreciate any of her animosity or lack of willingness to have anything to do with wrestling or anybody in it. And nonetheless, I feel bad, and I would say to Martha, I lost a brother, and my parents lost a son, and the rest of us lost a brother, and we were all extremely close and very devoted to Owen. So it's regrettable and sad that this kind of almost kind of hatred for the wrestling business and maybe for WWE is kind of compromised what should be a really close bond with Owen's brothers and sisters, because we were all extremely close to him right up till the end, and I haven't really had any interaction whatsoever with all Owen's kids who are now grown up, and it's and most of the other members of the Hart family, my kids and other members, kids, there's a whole bunch like Harry and Natty and whoever else, it's kind of been unfortunately
alienated against.
Yeah, Stonewaller. It's just kind of a sad, kind of byproduct of the whole thing, which is too bad, but
yeah,
I can appreciate, everyone reacts to, I guess, tragedies and things like that in their own way, and I guess that's Martha's way, and I certainly appreciate all she's gone through, and I have nothing against her, but I guess having said that, I regret that she seems to have a lot against me and everyone else in our family, so it's just unfortunate,
Yeah, totally. So you trained Billy Jack, correct?
Yeah, I even gave him the name. When he first came up here, he was, I think we had a guy who had worked down in Portland named David Schultz, Dr. D or whatever, and he had been down there, and he came back from Portland, and he said he had a couple of guys that he had crossed paths with in the gym, a guy named Scott Ferris and another guy named Bill Haynes, and he told me they were both kind of weightlifters or something like that, but they were wanting to get into the wrestling, and could I do them a favor and kind of help, break them in, and so he invited them up, and I took them down in the dungeon, and I had a few other young guys breaking in around that time, some of the Japanese guys, and I think Davey Boy was kind of pretty early on in Neidhart, and so I kind of got Bill Haynes kind of launched, and he seemed to have a little personality, a good body, and I came up with that Billy Jack persona, which is kind of a takeoff on that movie. Is it Tom? Can't remember.
So it was a takeoff of the movie.
Yeah, the name. So I had him wearing some kind of a black cowboy hat, similar to the Billy Jack character, and it seemed to suit his personality. He had a bit of fire, and it got over not bad. And then I think he ended up, after he left Stampede, I'm not sure if he went back to Portland for a bit, and then next thing I knew, he was in WWE. They were kind of launching. They had a number of guys that had come out of Stampede that were in, they had kind of half started, that were, including him and Hillbilly Jim and Honky Tonk and Bulldogs and Brett Neidhart, a few others, so. But I haven't really.
Did you ever work Scott Ferris or work with Scott Ferris at all?
I did a few times. You know, I started those guys. I had them. You know, I was the booker up in Calgary when they started. I, you know, pretty much gave them all their, you know, initial training and was monitoring them. You know, they were working in, you know, the circuit up here and working. We had some pretty good workers up here, including Schultz and Dynamite and some of the Japanese guys like Hito and I think Bad News Allen was up here, and so it was a pretty good working environment. And you know, I would say I probably had a lot to do with Billy Jack, and I think if he had played his cards a little different, he probably would have enjoyed a longer, more you know, kind of successful career. I just heard varying things where he kind of, you know, I'm not sure if he alienated people or, you know,
shot himself in his own foot.
Yeah, like that. I've heard something to that, you know, along those lines, and it's too bad. You know, he had a pretty good personality, I thought, for it, you know, and he had a good body, obviously, and I think if he had maybe
he had a little more passion on the mic, I think he would have probably been almost the perfect wrestler. I think he was too laid back and low key when he would talk, and that kind of, you know, I think held it back a little bit.
I really don't know what happened, you know. Obviously, when you're in WWE or whatever, you need to, or you should be, for all intents and purposes, especially if you're a rookie or whatever, keep your mouth shut and do what they tell you, and strive to not piss people off or get on the wrong side of, you know, important people. And I gather he didn't do that, you know, so I don't know who or what, you know. I'm just surmising and reiterating what I've heard, you know, but
well, Bruce, it was nice talking to you.
Yeah, well, nice talking to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, and I will never forget sitting in my living room and watching the news the night Owen died and hearing the news. I was so upset. I mean, I loved Owen. And I mean, he may be gone, but he's not forgotten, brother.
Yeah, and
the fans loved him.
You know, he was loved by the fans and loved by the boys. You know, he's one of those guys who I've never heard too many people have anything.
I mean, how could you not love him? He was amazing from what I could see on TV.
Yeah, Owen's like one of those guys who, you know, I don't think I've ever heard anyone have anything bad to say about him, you know.
The scary part was with that, you know, is that he got all the love and respect for what he was in wrestling and was able to do things to an extent even better than Bret Hart, to most extents. But, you know, and people would say, you know, he just did not have the same heart for the business that Bret did for something he did so much better on the mic, better in the ring, he had more wrestling ability. He was just, he had all the charisma. I mean, you know, it was all there for him, you know, and it was like,
no offense to Bret. I would say Owen is every bit as talented and charismatic and marketable and whatever as Bret or Davey or any of those guys. I don't think WWE used him anywhere near to his true potential. You know, in the decade he was in there, they had him in kind of one lame persona after another, and as you know, Owen was maybe too nice of a guy, or he was, at some point maybe he should have put the brakes on and said, I don't feel like doing that, or that's, sad to say, even in Kansas City, maybe I was told by somebody who was there, Jeff Jarrett or something, he didn't want to go up there, and they kind of coerced him into going up there, which is too damn bad. But
I think I'd just left the building. I'd have had to if I'd been him. I said, nope, sorry.
Yeah. I don't even want to digress by speculating on what happened that day, but all I would say is Owen, as well respected or well remembered as he is today and by WWE fans, it's still regrettable to me that he wasn't used anywhere near his true potential. I
heard he was a hell of a ribber.
Oh, and the good thing about, and I've pulled a few ribs in my day too, and it's a good antidote to the tension and the drudgery of being on the road. If you have a few practical jokes or ribs going on, and I pulled more than a few, and Owen was a master at that. He'd be doing some, he could impersonate different people, or he'd be doing different things like that. And I remember him doing a few of them to me, and I find me a little bit kind of frustrated or whatever, but afterwards he always laughed. And Owen was one of those guys who whatever he did, like his ribbing or whatever, it was never malicious or was never harmful. It was always kind of in its own way beneficial or therapeutic, because it kind of eased tension, or it got the boys kind of kind of engaged or whatever. So he was a master of it. One of the ones I remember that made me laugh was I can't remember who, it may have been Brett who told me about this, but they used to have these two guys called the Godwins who were supposedly hillbillies, and they were always having the
I remember them.
And they had the livestock, like the pigs and the cows, and so I guess one day this truck showed up. I guess they had some local livestock guy or something that they hired or whatever, and he showed up, and he had the pigs and the goats and the cows and whatever the hell else, and he said, where do I take these? And Owen, apparently without missing a beat, took them to Vince McMahon's dressing room, and and had the whole works of them brought in, and then Vince showed up a few hours later and walks in there, and there's like cow shit and sheep shit and goats and chickens and ducks, and I heard initially he was up in arms, like and then I heard he eventually started laughing and saying, "Owen got me again," or something like that. But yeah, Owen was only Owen could pull off some of that stuff,
So tell me about Natty, Bruce, and what do you think with what they're doing with her, and how do you think that she's getting?
I'm glad they kind of gave her a good shot at the recent SummerSlam. It's been kind of hit and miss. Sometimes they've pushed her, and other times they've been kind of not using her anywhere close to her capabilities. So, I'm hoping that whatever she did at WrestleMania upped her stock a bit. I think they just shot some angle with Sasha Banks, and so hopefully it'll all prove to be a step in the right direction for her. She's been down there long enough, so to her credit that she's still perceived to be in her prime. I guess she's outlasted a lot of when you think back,
a lot of the women,
the ones, like Lita and all kinds of others that were down there when she first got there. But yeah, she's been pretty.
And she's managed to stay relatively healthy through most of her career.
Yeah, that's not easy, but I hope she has a few more good years at least, and I hope WWE appreciates the effort and commitment, and I'm pleased to see in general that the girls are being used in a more tasteful, respectful manner now. I think to some degree back in the days of Sable and some of that, it was more kind of, for want of a better term, exploitative, or it was more tits and ass, and
I had the best experience, Bruce. I'll tell you, a few months back, Bob and I don't know if you had helped with it too or whatnot, but I know Bob was able to get a hold of Natalia and hooked me up with some prime seats for Raw a few months back here in Portland. And Natty was the first one out. It was her and Alicia Fox, and they did their thing and came by, and she waved and said hi to us. And after the match, Alicia Fox comes walking around the ring, and she's looking around, and she looks right over at me. And I don't know if Natty did it to her to do it. I had her do it to us or what, but it's like she looked right at me, and she goes, "And you're not my friend," and went storming up the ramp.
Well, that's good. I don't know what, I'm not sure what the motive was there, but that's good that she acknowledged, or I'm not sure if she's trying to include you guys in the charade or what, but yeah,
it was one of the opening matches they were doing for the like main event or whatever. So I just thought it was awesome, just for the experience and the way they like came in and pointed at me and was like, that was kind of made me feel special.
Yeah, I remember way the hell back in would have been late '90s when I was first breaking Natty and TJ is Tyson Kidd's real name, and Harry, and there was a few other guys that Rick Victor was down there, and there was a few other guys, but yeah, was glad they overcame a lot of, was by no means an overnight thing. They all had to pay a lot of dues, and they kind of were through a lot of so-called trials and tribulations, and so I'm glad Natty's, kind of been able to enjoy the fruits of her labor, so to speak, and I think some of the young guys, that's one of the things that's wrong with the business these days, and something if I was giving, advice to WWE or AEW, I'd be telling them they need to, reaching out, if there's maybe I hear Matt Mertz and some of those guys in Portland, there's probably some local guys there. They should be endeavoring to interact with some of these regional local promoters, whether they're guys in Oregon or California or Florida or wherever. And I think ultimately that would be good for the business. It's one of the things that's most disconcerting about the state of the business these days is the foundation is exceedingly
rough.
Precarious. There's no not much at the grassroots level, and that's cause for concern, and I think there's all kinds of potential for that. I'm sure that if AEW or WWE were to contact some people that are, involved in promotions in the Pacific Northwest, it would be a good fit for developing talent, breaking in guys, and also just reestablishing some kind of a fan base down there, which is you can't sustain, in my estimation, you can't sustain a wrestling fan base having WWE come once a year to the big town or whatever, and usually giving them unless it's a pay-per-view or a TV taping, more often than not, it's kind of an uninspired walkthrough. They're just kind of, going through the motions and selling foam fingers and overpriced T-shirts and crap, but they're not really,
Yeah, me and Matt are working on a project right now where it's never been done in the Pacific Northwest, and we're trying to put together a Hall of Fame / Legends convention for some of the still living members of the Pacific Northwest, and
it's
something that they do it all over the country.
I just worked the odd shot down in Portland. I was down there, oddly enough, in about 1980. I was so-called world mid-heavyweight champion, and I think I worked with some guy named Eric Embry who was down there, and I think Piper and Mark Dell and Rip Oliver and a few of those guys were down there around that time. And, but yeah, so I don't by any means. I remember meeting old Dutch Savage was there, and I think old. Oh man, I'm trying to remember. A few of the Samoans were there. Old Fart Snuka maybe even been there if I recall, and I think a guy named maybe Beauregard and some of those. A few other old farts were there when I was there, but yeah, I remember seeing old Elton Owens and Don and Barry Owens as kind of a young punk then, but yeah, I'd love to see some of those guys, because I think Matt Bourne may have been around, old Doink, Matt Osborne, he was.
Yeah,
he's back in, yeah, brother. Bruce, man, I appreciate you being on the show tonight, brother.
Yeah, but let me know what's going on, and anytime I can be of any help to you guys, let me know, and I appreciate you guys seeing fit to have one of the Harts on your show. Thanks for keeping the flame burning.
Yes.
The privilege on my end, it's a privilege on our end, brother. On our end, brother, for you taking time out for your knowledge, your time, to expertise being on the show. I appreciate it, sir.
My pleasure. And
you guys are going to YouTube, correct, Bruce?
Yeah. And I appreciate any of you guys who are, you guys deserve a lot more credit than people give you for, keeping the memories alive, and for having, been fans and supporters, without, people like you, none of us would be anybody either. So I appreciate all the fans out there, and you guys are the wind beneath our wings.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate it.
We're well said, brother.
Yeah, well, thank you, and I won't keep you right now, but anytime you ever need an encore performance, or you want to get my perspective.
Oh, yeah, we barely scratched the surface.
Oh, yeah, I've got a zillion. Maybe we can talk about some of the. I'm good friends with so many of the Luther Lindsays and Shag Thomases and Sandy Bars and Ox Anderson and Dutch Savages and,
yeah,
all those guys. So, if I could ever render perspective about any of them, feel free to call.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, so much, very much, brother. Thank you for your time. Be on the show again, and I appreciate it, and we sure will call you.
Okay, you guys take care. Give my best to my good friend Matt Mertz, and
I will.
If there's any of those old cronies of mine, I'm always afraid to ask. Invariably, he passed away or something. Hey, the boys are still down there. Give them best regards from the Hart family.
Yes, sir. Sure will.
Okay, and you guys have a great night, and look forward to the next time.
Thank you
again, Bruce. You have a good evening too.
You too. Racing and.
This bunny keeps going and going and going, and there's more stories, man. And it's like a fossil sitting in the dirt, getting exposed.
Yeah. You want to go into the time machine of professional wrestling, just call Bruce Hart.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, very much. So what's going on your end tonight, brother? How you doing? That's the official summary.
I'm all right, man. I'm just, I think I'm going to go have the pool with my buddy and relax.
There you go.
Did you get referee set up?
Yes, sir, I did.
Good. Yeah, he's it's hard on. Well, it looks like tonight.
Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, I got Jim Valley next week, and the following week we got Jeannie Clark, August the 30th. She's in Greece right now having a nice family vacation with $2. I'm sure she's talking to her husband, Stone Cold, at this time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. All right, brother, man. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, be good if not be good at it, and no one is
Thank
good.
You, God.
Great boy.